Why aren't you going?
It's 2:56. We've rolled over to 0, and so I thought it would just be silence. Right? I mean, it's an 8-bit integer, so now it's 2:56, so therefore it's 0, and then that's just silence.
Why don't we just not release an episode?
Because then how are we ever going to get to 2:57?
But that doesn't fit in 8 bits. There's a lot of problems with this logic.
Well, there was that or release episode 0, but we never made an episode 0. We foolishly started with 1.
All right.
If you were still listening, welcome to Embedded. As you can tell, this is going to be a little bit of a silly show where we answer listener questions and talk about how you can be a rockstar programmer.
Okay.
Okay, and since it is episode 256, the first order of business
is lightning round.
No, is the cupcakes. You got cupcakes, right? I have this plan where I just mash them in my mouth, Cookie Monster style, and the sprinkles and the confetti cake goes everywhere until my microphone is encrusted in frosting and sugar, and that's how it will always be.
I don't think we're going to do that. There's some astronaut ice cream on the desk, but that's all. I don't have any cupcakes.
This is not a good start to the show.
We could go out for cupcakes after the show and then cut in the portion of you sounding like Cookie Monster.
Yeah, I don't think that's going to work. That's just...
So you're saying you don't want cupcakes?
We don't need to record the cupcakes. I'm never saying I don't
record the cupcakes. It'll sound a lot like the first minute of the show.
with chewing sounds? Okay, let's... Yes. Hi, welcome to the show.
What show is this?
This is show 256. This is Embedded.
What's the name of the podcast?
I said Embedded.
Oh, you did.
I haven't introduced you. You're Chris. Chris White. And I'm Elecia White. And we do this show about engineering and cupcakes.
Is that what it's about?
Sometimes. Let's see. First, I have random news to get out of the way. First of the news bits is that we have a newsletter. In case
news about news,
you prefer email as the way to get information about the show and blog. Apparently RSS is dead. I keep hearing this, but the newsletter is basically just RSS and email. Next, I'm sure that now, having started the show, that now is when you say, you know what, I wish I could support these people and the effort they put into this show. If you feel that way, you are welcome to support us on Patreon, which is this little program where you put in your credit card and then every month they take out $1 or $4 or however many dollars you tell them they can take out. And in return for that, you get the satisfaction of knowing that our guests have better mics and that you buy us cupcakes, which...
And they can join our embedded.fm Slack group, right?
That is true. That is part of the posts in the Patreon. And things go on there. Jobs are posted, conversations happen, and sometimes...
We're around sometimes.
We're around, and sometimes we're not. And I have to say they're a very interesting group of people for, about all kinds of things.
And it's a lot of people now, actually. It's over 100, something like that?
Yeah, and people have offered electrical help or software help or what chip should I use in this. Yeah, it's been cool. One other reason to support on Patreon is the idea that we might do transcripts.
Yeah.
Yeah, you can hear Christopher's excitement about that.
I'm against them.
But a couple of people have asked for various reasons. And one of our listeners has offered to try out doing them. And thank you, Fred. And if it goes well, then we might do more pay for professional services. So Fred's just going to do a couple to see if anybody actually uses them. So if you want to say, yes, I would use them, then go ahead and let me know on email or
you have to really
Slack
want to use them, not, oh, that sounds like a great idea. But, so you have to think deep in your head, would I actually use these? Not.
Yeah, because Fred is doing it out of the goodness of his heart, and I don't want to ask him to do a bunch because he's a embedded systems professional and has things to do. But I mean, it's pretty expensive once we start paying for it.
It's like $1 a minute, right?
It's like $1 a minute.
And that's
especially since our material is technical, so we can't just do the cheapest automated.
Yeah.
Right now, Google does automated on YouTube.
It's pretty,
and it is pretty bad.
Results.
Every week, I look to see exactly how the intro is, how they spelled my name, or what they did instead of my name. Yeah. I liked the day I'm under the sea white.
Yeah.
That was nice. But it would help people like Akarsh, who wanted us to put in timestamps and markers in the show notes.
So
chapters.
I can do chapters. One of the programs I use to put the podcast together supports inserting chapter marks. I've thought about it. It requires me to pay a different kind of attention while we're recording or while I'm editing to actually generate topical chapter marks.
Because we often do random order, and I would rather have a good conversation than have topics.
If people really want this, we need to have some more volume of requests. Because
it is a pain in the neck. And I think if we did transcripts, then that would solve some of his problems too.
Sure.
Because his goal was to skip to the something exciting mentioned in the show notes. And so if we had the transcripts, he could find that. Of course, I don't know where to put the transcripts, but we'll figure that out when it comes to it.
We'll have to get we have one. A website.
A website?
Yeah.
Yeah, we do have a website.
You just link the transcript in the episode thing. Do you hear something?
Yeah, our cat wants to join the show. She's like, it's 2:56. It's time for me to be on again. But last I checked, she'd retired. So I don't know what she's going to talk about.
Okay.
Do you want to do listener questions first or Rockstar programming skills?
Let's do listener questions.
Okay. From Bahati Gitego, who enjoys our podcast, has been tinkering with the ST Micro F1 series. That's one of their low end. Playing around with the HAL and the standard peripheral library. Library is poorly documented. He said it, not me. Or possibly, anyway. Well, I should have read it out as Bahati because I don't know.
Right, fine. It's not great.
Bahati wanted to know what we use for programming the ST Micro, bare metal or micro libraries or what?
I don't use ST, so I leave this to you.
Oh, okay. It depends on which chip you have and what you're doing with it. I had a client recently who was a relatively inexperienced client, wanted a demo system and wanted to be able to modify things after I was no longer part of the project. I put them on Embed, which has an operating system. It has a HAL. It has lots of nice fun things. It has a compiler. And it is not something I would do for high production. But it is a great place to start. It's more complicated than Arduino and less complicated than any other option. For another client, I recently used Cube, which is ST's linked together all of the I/O pins and set up your clocks, and it's all graphical. And then it spits out a bunch of code, and it has all your drivers written for you, and you can even set up DMA. It's actually really great for setting up DMA because it makes it kind of easy and straightforward.
But that's not a replacement for HAL.
That generates everything you need to do to call HAL.
Okay.
So it's actually a hardware abstraction layer made graphical and then set up according to how you want.
So you decide how you want your chip configured. You answer a bunch of questions in this graphical thing, and it spits out headers, and some code that sets up the chip the way you want. So I want this peripheral to be this configuration. I want these GPIOs to go do this in this configuration. I want these clocks configured this way. And then it spits all that out for you.
Yeah.
That seems very useful, but that doesn't bloat your code or anything. It's just setup code, right?
ST's HAL is not the most efficient.
Oh, because Cube calls the HAL.
Because Cube calls the HAL.
Gotcha.
And the standard peripheral library, which, I mean, it's not bad, but it does things like every time you toggle a GPIO, it checks to see if the GPIO is valid. That's great sometimes, but if you actually want to go fast, you have to trust that your GPIO is valid and just do the one clock cycle thing. It also, because it does things like check to see the GPIO is valid each time, that is code. And it puts a lot of that code in. A lot of code you don't need, a lot of code you maybe don't want. And so, yeah, it bloats your code and it slows your processor. It is very easy, though. If you are running a Cortex-M0 with only a little bit of flash space, you probably want to go straight bare metal. If you are running a Cortex-M4 and it's twice as big as you need, use Q. It makes it easy. So, yeah, it depends. That was a long way to say it depends.
Well, I think bringing up Cube is a lot of people are advocating for and against it. Some of them the same people at the same time. So it's kind of hard to decide. But it seems like one of those things you could start with and see what it does.
Yes, it is a good place to start with because it shows you what it's doing. It doesn't generate library code you can't read. It generates C code you can read. And even the HAL things it calls into, you can read. And then you can strip out what you don't want.
And even from my kind of osmotic experience with ST, it seems like some of those configuration things are really challenging without something like this. Like the clock setup. I've seen diagrams of the clock tree.
Yeah.
You could put it on your wall and, it has 40 different nodes that you have to figure out.
It's true. And it does make it easier to set up. Like I said, I used a cube recently for a professional project because it was a little simpler. It was also simpler to explain to the client what I was doing. Although later the client wanted to swap pins and I was like, should I tell him to do it in Cube? Should I just go ahead and use the code and never regenerate? Or should I just do this myself? And I chose the latter.
That is the question with auto-generated stuff is, do you use the auto-generation graphical tool all the time whenever you make a change? Or do you use it to get your first cut of setup code and then from then on maintain it as code? I mean, there's arguments both ways, but I would kind of like cut and run after doing the initial setup and things were working. And if you had to make changes, make them in the code.
It's a choice.
Because you don't know.
And you should document what you're doing because you don't want someone to come in later and then auto-gen again.
Right. And you might get a different version, right? They might update it, and then you go in and auto-generate it to make a small change, and suddenly everything's changed, and you've got this massive patch, and you're not even sure if it's changed anything substantive, right? So you have to be careful with auto-generated code.
Well, that's one reason that in Andre's blog, he very specifically says, don't put any code in main, like put like the one line that calls your functions. There should be an init call and a loop call, and you just call those and nothing else goes in main because you never know what's going to change or what's going to get killed.
And he's written a lot about this. He
really has. So if you want to know more about Cube and ST and what's in there, check out Andre's Embedded Wednesday blog.
Okay.
You highlighted the Hippocratic Oath for connected medical devices.
I highlighted it so I could open it and look at it and see what it was because there was no description. So we might as well talk about it now.
Now, yes.
So you have a link in here, and it's a long URL. I'm not going to repeat, but it'll be in the show notes. But basically, it's a document called the Hippocratic Oath for connected medical devices. Where did this come from?
I am the Calvary.org, which is one of those organizations that works to make security and privacy more understandable to both the consumer and engineering communities.
How did you come by it?
I was looking around for trying to explain to a potential client that their plan for BLE on their medical device was not kosher, which they did eventually take that advice and start to understand what the HIPAA compliance would mean for them.
So the traditional Hippocratic Oath, I don't know if it's always laid out in its complete form, but it seems rather simple and short.
I will do no harm.
First, do no harm, and let's look it up.
Yeah.
But you've read this one, I'm assuming?
Yes.
So, okay, it's in ancient Greek, so I can't read it.
Sound it out, man.
Well, I don't know the alphabet either, so that makes it all a little bit more difficult. Not to be confused with hypocrisy, by the way.
Yes, that's important.
I swear by Apollo the healer. Well, that's an interesting start. Okay, well, basically, it's the core of it is first do no harm. So this is a similar idea?
This is a similar idea in taking responsibility for the ethics of medical devices, particularly connected medical devices. I will revere and protect human life and always act for the benefit of my patients. I recognize that all systems fail. Inherent defects and adverse conditions are inevitable. And it goes on from there, where it talks about how failure impacts patient safety and how we have to be resilient against accidents and intentional adversaries, such as hackers. And it goes on to talk about cyber safety in the design and evidence capture so that you can figure out when something goes bad. And I wanted to bring this up as people wonder, well, what do I have to do? What are my responsibilities? You don't have to take this oath, but you should at least look at it.
It's rather long to take as an oath.
To say aloud. But it goes through what all these things means, about working with third parties and shared responsibilities and testing. It's a pretty long document that talks about, as an engineer, what should your ethical responsibility be towards the people who maybe have your device implanted in them.
And the core of it is the same. First, do no harm, and then they go on to describe in several ways how to accomplish that.
Yeah.
That's excellent. I wished I'd had that many times, at least at a minimum, to show to people.
Yes. This is even more convincing than, hey, I don't look good in orange.
Right. I'm really glad that somebody put this together. It's actually a few years old.
Yes, it is. It's not new. And I bet someone had pointed me to it.
I don't see any swearing to gods here, which is an oversight.
No Apollo here?
No Apollo, no Asclepius, no Hygeia, no Panacea. So I think they need to add that to.
Okay, what do you think the gods should be for a technology-related thing? I mean, I don't want to swear to Woz. He's not really a god.
What book am I thinking of that had weird emergent cyber gods?
Like half of them that I've been reading.
Oh, you know what? I think it was the Hyperion series. The later books in the Hyperion series. There were gods called the Loa or something that lived in their equivalent of the universe-wide internet. Yeah.
The Loa are usually a voodoo thing.
Yeah, that's what they were modeled after.
Okay.
Anyway, this is cool. You should check it out, especially if you work on medical devices. And even if you don't work on medical devices, you know what? Some of this applies to all kinds of things.
If you're working on automotive, airplanes, anything that involves safety, take a look at this, please. Let's see, from Paul, sort of in the related, but not really. Make recently had an article where they talked about how to tighten security for do-it-yourself IoT gadgets. Mm-hmm. So please stop putting those Raspberry Pis unprotected with no password on the raw internet.
People do that?
Indubitably, people do that. Let's just punch an IP hole in. Make Magazine has top tips to tighten your security. So I will link to that. It's copyrighted, but it might be worth a discussion just going through all the lists and talking about each. I don't think we're going to do that today, though, because we have a lot to do and we still have to buy cupcakes.
All right.
Or do you want to talk about it?
I read it at the time, but I don't have any particular memory of it.
I mean,
well, we should breeze through it real quick and
change the default user password.
Obvious, but yes, perhaps people don't realize there are default user passwords. Yes,
I mean, if it's Raspberry or Pi, it's default. Disable password login with SSH, which we all use it for debugging.
It's another one you might not be aware is enabled.
Yeah. Update your OS because they don't just make the updates for fun.
Sometimes they do.
Well, sometimes they do.
Have a firewall.
Yeah.
Yeah, I mean, these are motherhood and apple pie stuff.
This was like the time that Chris and I were having this long discussion, and I came down strongly in favor of reading. He pointed out to me that this was not news.
And then they have some stuff for all devices. Interestingly, they say use a VPN. Oh, I see, to get into your home stuff. That makes sense. I would not recommend necessarily using a VPN for your general use. There's a lot of those out there. And people make a big deal out of protecting your security from the ISPs by using a VPN for all of your surfing and whatnot. I have mixed feelings about that because you're just transferring your trust to somebody else. Do you trust random VPN company more than your ISP? Maybe, but it's at least a question you should ask.
Random VPN company has less vested interest in controlling you.
Yes, but you know nothing about them.
Well, there is that. That is a little nervous making.
Their entire business model could be stealing your stuff and selling it, and they could be based in a country you're not aware of. So anyway, just know what you're doing. But yeah, good stuff. And it's worth at least, especially with the Linux-based ports like the Raspberry Pi, where you might not be aware of things that are open by default, or at least more open than you want. So, cool.
Tyler is a firmware engineer working at a startup in New York City and is thinking about starting a meetup. Tyler wants to attract other engineers and people interested in embedded systems to attend. Tyler's looking for people interested in joining, presenting, something. Yeah, it would have been good if I had replied to Tyler and said, okay, do you have a plan? But at this point, Tyler has just said, meetup. Let's do a meetup in New York City.
You put this in the notes.
I know. If you would like to speak at Tyler's event, or you would like to be connected with Tyler or something, yes, feel free to email me, show@embedded.fm. I do eventually read all of the emails. I don't reply to them all the time.
Oh, well organized.
Yeah, well, there are still some sticker offers that are like 6 months old, so I will eventually get to you. I promise. And now we have a bunch of C++ questions. These are your favorite.
Oh, God.
Yes. Okay. Just listen to number 247 on C++ with Jason Turner. And was thinking that an interesting question of whether the language properties of C++ help the compiler generate optimal code are also helpful for the programmer to write and understand and maintain in a complex project.
Well, I guess we'd have to define what the language properties of C++ which help the compiler generate optimal code are.
Those are some of the things we talked about with Jason. Some of the iterators, some of the libraries. I think that my answer is generally yes, most of those things are helpful to the programmers. They aren't necessarily helpful to C programmers who don't know them because there's always a learning curve. But
the whole idea behind C++ is to generate more structured code, right?
Yeah.
I mean, objects, the whole object-oriented mindset, whether or not you like it or not, the impetus behind it was to structure your code in a more modular fashion. So I think to the extent that those structural things help the compiler, I'm not sure that some of them do, that the answer is yes, but smaller details like the newer features like iterators and such, they're more expressive. And by expressive, I mean you're able to accomplish more complicated things in less code. So it depends on how you feel about expressive languages. If you feel that expressive languages help you organize your code better and produce better code, then also yes. But if you feel like expressive languages are hard to learn and complicated from a syntactic standpoint, because you have to know all these weird idioms and ways of doing things that maybe you could do in C quite easily because you only have to know a few keywords, then no. You can be a bad programmer in any language. Right?
Yes.
I think a lot of these arguments about which language is better, and people get in their minds that, C++ is terrible, or, you should all be using C#, or, Haskell's the way to go, or whatever.
You missed Rust and Erlang and Go, or we have to say those, or people will email.
Rust is bad.
Thanks.
I just want more email. I just want people to love me.
That's not...
And if I say Rust is bad, I'll get email. It doesn't have to be good email. No, where was my point? My point was, there's nothing magical about any of these things. I feel. I mean, there's nothing great about C as a language, except it's very old. It's very easy to shoot your foot off. But, there's good things about it and there's bad things about it. And if you don't know what you're doing, if you aren't using the language kind of the way it was intended, then it's easy to write terrible code. And people tell me, I've heard people say all the time, C++, it just makes spaghetti code. And not my projects that I've done C++ on.
You can make spaghetti code in any language.
And I do think it's all of our biases about what we've seen in a particular language. And my bias against Rust has nothing to do with Rust. I've never used Rust. It's stupid.
It's just they named a language after something awful.
Decay. No.
Yeah.
No. Rust maybe, if I used Rust, I might become an advocate for it. So my character persona playing a Rust adversary is just that.
I tend to think that more lines of code are harder to maintain.
That's true.
But if they're in a language you don't know, then they're impossible to maintain. So if you're going to have expressive, idiomatic C++, then you have to learn that language. You can't... if you ever look at my Python code, I write C in Python. It's not pretty. I occasionally manage to do a dictionary slice that looks good, but overall, no, not so much. And yet I can read the Python that's pretty, although once they get multiple lambdas in one line, I'm kind of lost because and I think get easily distracted.
I think we can talk about two different things, right? We can talk about that syntactic. We just don't know the language.
Yeah.
We don't know it with the facility to read it. And it's easier to not know a language that's more expressive.
And it was those features of the language that Jason was talking about as far as optimizing it to be better.
So to pull back from the yes a little bit, in principle, you can generate cleaner, nicer code, but it's harder to read for the completely uninitiated, non-fluent programmer. And you know what? The same principles that make good code apply to all languages, right? Modularity,
testability,
good interfaces, testability, keeping things small and tight.
Using the language to its best abilities.
Oh, sometimes.
I have seen C. I've seen assembly written in C, basically.
Yeah.
I've seen C programmers who don't really bother with for loops, who only know that the while loop is a thing. There are ways in any language you can make it look terrible and illegible, and
Except
the
Perl.
best you can do. Oh, well, yeah, let's just talk smack about Perl. You really want some emails, don't you? Are you lonely? Yeah. And C++ is not easy to learn.
No, it's not.
I'm not going to deny that. So let's go on to the next C++ question, which Jason Turner stated that C# and Java have much big code specifications than C++. I would put that down to my sugar crash, except Christopher didn't get cupcakes.
I didn't know I was supposed to.
C# and Java have much bigger code specs than C++. But surely C++ and Java are higher level languages.
They are? I think at this point C++ is pretty high level. I mean, I guess they have garbage collectors. Does that make them higher level? I think they have big libraries of support stuff, which makes their specs bigger. Does that make them a higher level language? I don't know. Agglomerating libraries doesn't count as language to me. So
agglomerating?
Yeah, agglomerating. That's a word.
Is that aggregation and conglomeration at the same time?
Agglomerating. Agglomeration. It's right here. It's a word.
Did you just add it to the Wiki Dictionary?
No.
All right.
Economies of agglomeration. Anyway, it's a perfectly cromulent word.
Okay, so the answer here is, I don't know.
I don't know. I think I tend to think of C++, Java, C# at around the same level. And the reason Java and C# have bigger specs is because they have frameworks attached to them that C++ does not. I don't count frameworks as part of a language.
Yeah, if you added C++ and OpenCV and C++ as a single spec, then it would be enormous.
Yeah.
Okay, so this question I believe we can answer.
Today on questions we won't and can't answer, but we will talk about.
Rayon. I am currently taking a C/C++ programming class, and my instructor insists on us not using parentheses unless they are absolutely needed. Are you banging the table?
Yes.
To paraphrase the teacher's line of reasoning, use of unnecessary parentheses clutters the code and advertises the programmer's lack of knowledge, understanding, and experience. Rayon says, I don't have a problem with this. It's his class, so I have to play by his rules. I tend to think it's just a balancing act. It's okay to use, quote, unnecessary parens judiciously, especially if you think there's a good chance your expression could be misread by others or the future you. After all, I doubt that the typical competent professional programmer has memorized the entire operator precedence chart.
So, Rayon, your instincts are 100% correct in every way. And your professor, whomever they are,
doesn't listen to this show.
Is not a professional programmer. And they have a weird sense of aesthetics that has nothing to do with clean code or maintainability. Parentheses cost nothing. And while it is possible to use so many that it becomes unreadable, I think the likelihood of that is far less than using too few and getting into serious problems because you screw up an operator precedence. Or some weird casting thing. Use them. There's no parent instruction being generated.
If you run out of parentheses, I believe Andre will
ship you
some from Canada.
Artisanal parentheses.
Yes. Yeah, I was pretty sure we could answer that question.
I was shocked when I saw this. It was like, who would argue for using the minimum parentheses necessary? Why? You don't do that in math. Parens. You don't do that in math. I remember doing reams of homework, right? In like physics and math. You write parentheses on stuff so you don't screw up.
I know. I'm not, sorry. Anybody who wants to argue with the lack of parentheses being better, you can send emails.
I mean, it's one thing to say you shouldn't wear socks with sandals.
And I actually want to know what happens if your professor tries to teach Lisp. I believe his head will explode.
He's a CS professor? Programming? What did the parentheses do to this person? Is what I want to know.
Yeah.
What's the story there? What's the backstory?
Yeah.
Did he sit on one?
Get this opinion. Okay. Now for the part you've all been waiting for.
What? The end of the show?
God, we're like those Muppets. Do you want to talk about the new Muppet movie?
No.
Okay.
I don't know anything about it other than what I've told you.
Rockstar programming. Something that is often termed as, kind of, people put it on job recs. We want a rockstar programmer.
Or a ninja.
Code ninja. And then other people say, why don't we just have professionals?
10x developer.
Why don't we just have people who do their jobs? Why do we have to
unicorns?
And do you really want to work with a rock star? They trash the hotel rooms.
Code gnomes.
They're constantly drunk. Yeah. But we want to go beyond that on how you can be a rock star programmer without trashing the hotel room.
So this guy, Dylan Beatty, forgive me if I've mispronounced your name, has proposed the Rockstar programming language. It is Turing complete. And the cool thing about it is it seems like you could actually do it. And how it works is all of your language keywords and such go together to construct lyrics. So, yeah. So he's got an example of FizzBuzz in the most poetic implementation. You can be less poetic.
Well, do you want to talk about what FizzBuzz is and ruin all of the interviews that are going to happen next week?
FizzBuzz is okay. Start over. FizzBuzz is
what was that S word going to be?
FizzBuzz is a basic programming interview question on the complexity level of stir copy, or maybe a little less.
Oh no, I think FizzBuzz is a little more,
really?
But okay. It's a very reasonable, often used programming question.
You go through a loop, incrementing a value, and if it's modulo 3, I'm doing this from memory, you print fizz. If it's modulo 5, you print buzz. If it's modulo both, you do new line or put in the curses character to shake the screen. I don't know. What does it do?
It's supposed to print out something like 1, 2, fizz, 4, buzz, fizz, 7, 8, fizz, buzz, 11, fizz, 13, 14, fizz, buzz.
Right. Okay. So if it's both, you do fizz, buzz. Anyway, so yeah, it's a simple little problem. So in C, you'd have for I equals 0, for int I equals 0 to whatever, and then you'd have if. I'm going to give the whole answer, but if this is modulo 3, then we print this. If it's modulo 5, we print this, and blah blah blah. In Rockstar,
and you can do some clever things, and people look for the clever things. Anyway, in Rockstar, they give an implementation that is basic. Modulus takes number and divider.
Yeah.
While number is as high as divisor.
Yeah, but that's no fun.
This is just the while loop. And it goes through and it has a limit. It has a counter. Fizz is 3, buzz is 5, and it will shout things. Okay. Boring.
But you can.
There's idiomatic, poetic literals, and idiomatic rockstar.
Who's going to say this?
I thought you would.
I'm not going to sing it. I don't know the melody.
Do you want me to?
No.
Good, because I sang last time.
Midnight takes your heart and your soul, while your heart is as high as your soul. Put your heart without your soul into your heart.
Give back your heart.
Desire is a love-struck lady killer. My world is nothing.
Fire is ice, hate is water, until my world is desire.
Build my world up. If midnight taking my world, fire is nothing, and midnight taking my world, hate is nothing.
Shout FizzBuzz!
Take it to the top.
If midnight taking my world, fire is nothing.
Shout fizz!
Take it to the top.
If midnight taking my world, hate is nothing.
Say buzz.
Take it to the top.
Whisper my world.
I'm waiting for the compiler to come out for this. I know. So the great and clever thing, the little genius bit, is how he did numeric literals. So like if you want a number, right?
You want 5 or 3 for FizzBuzz.
So the great thing about this is he's made it so you can put almost anything in to make numbers up, which allows you much more lyrical fun. So
Tommy was a love-struck lady killer. Initializes the value Tommy with the value 100 because A is 1, love-struck is 10, and lady killer is 10. So that's 100. Sweet Lucy was a dancer. Initializes Sweet Lucy with the value 16.
A has 1 character and dancer has 6.
Yes.
And you can do floats too. So he's got my dreams were ice, a life unfulfilled, waking everybody up, taking booze and pills.
Initializes my dreams to pi.
Because there's a period after ice. So were ice 3, or yeah.
Ice is 3.
3, period, 1, 4. Yeah, so it all works.
So there's a whole specification that goes over how to do loops, take it to the top.
Take it to the top is genius.
It's part of the loop. And you can, it has neat keywords, but it's less about the keywords and more about their ability to use different variables and how they do it. And it's only a specification. There is no compiler for it yet, although there may be soon.
That's wrong. The last time we looked at this was a couple of months ago, and I've scrolled down.
Only a couple of weeks ago.
All right. There are now 12 implementations.
Oh my goodness, there are.
JavaScript, Elixir, Java.
There's a whole subreddit now.
Not Alexa. ML, Python transpiler, Ruby transpiler. You can build your career on this now. Syntax highlighting for VS Code. Anyway,
people are awesome.
Dylan, you've done a miraculous thing, and I hope it brings you great fame and joy in your life, because I love it.
There was the reasoning behind it, and that was one of the...
Yes.
But why? Mainly because if we make Rockstar a real and completely pointless programming language, then recruiters and hiring managers won't be able to talk about Rockstar developers anymore. And Dylan is also mentioning making stickers that say certified Rockstar developer.
I will buy one. I will buy 10.
So we talk about languages. We talk about C++ and having to know it and having to do it idiomatically. And then we look at these specifications of languages that are odd and created for their oddness more than their utility. Although the poetic nature of it, I like. It would draw me to read more code and to puzzle it out, which is not something I necessarily want to do.
You definitely would have to puzzle it out. This is not something that you can read and say, oh, that's what this does.
But it is pretty. And we don't usually have a lot of languages that are pretty. Of course, we don't even have languages that are specified a lot of times. A real specification?
Really?
Rust, I'm looking at you.
I think you're going to get email about that. There's no Rust specification? I think there is.
I thought there wasn't. A couple of the new languages people say, oh, you should learn that. And I look it up and I'm like, yeah, there is no official specification for that language. Forgive me if I don't want to write something
that doesn't sound right.
That is not only new, doesn't run on any of my platform, doesn't have a debugger I know how to use, which is my fault, not theirs.
I don't believe any of this.
Yeah.
How do you not have a specification? I just don't.
Have you found it yet? I see you Googling over there.
No.
How hard is it? I mean, you just type in Rust specification or maybe Rust language because, Rust is a thing.
I typed Rust specification. I don't get anything about the language until like the 8th. And then I'm at the Rust documentation. And then there's the Why do we keep bagging on Rust? I don't
it's
care.
a perfectly fine language. I know nothing about it other than people say we should learn it with such vehemence that I just kind of
I'm not going to learn it until somebody
away.
Gives me a reason to learn it.
Well, that's the other thing is that with these languages, some people really enjoy learning new languages, and more power to them.
Fine.
But I have to get things done.
I don't like doing things. Things are bad.
I got Christopher an outdoor couch. Guess what he's working on?
What do you mean? Oh, I'm working physically on the couch.
Yeah, that was what I meant.
What am I working on?
Your tan, mostly.
Yeah, I moved from that sort of greenish glow to more of a light beige. Anyway, sorry, Rust people. We don't really mean it. We don't mean it.
We really don't know anything about your language other than you like it quite a lot.
And it will only be karmic retribution when I'm forced to learn it when it finally takes over.
Yes, that is true. That would be perfect retribution.
But no, I don't see a specification. Anyway, so yeah, Rockstar, pretty cool. And I like joke projects like this because not only are they funny, but they're good learning experiences, because I bet you could look at some of those implementations and learn a lot about parsing and lexing languages and stuff like that. And it's always more fun to learn about that stuff with an example that's amusing than sometimes a real example.
Yeah.
So more power to you. Oh, there's a subreddit.
Yeah.
And a developers Discord group. So, yes. You've written some code and released it lately.
It's not on this list.
There's nothing else on the list, so I'm adding things.
Yeah. After our conversation about
You've given up on embedded completely.
No. Now
you're a Python developer.
No. Tracer, JSON, actually. I've been doing a lot of JSON, which isn't even a language.
Against the advice of practically everyone on Twitter. People have opinions.
People really do. Okay, so after our Git episode, I realized that I don't often put my small projects in Git for reasons that I don't know.
You put them in Git, not GitHub?
I don't version control some of my personal projects.
Get out of town.
It's true. If something is dumb and small, I'm like, why bother? And one of those things that was on the why bother list was my little tracery robot. You can put together a JSON set of rules that follow the tracery mapping, and you can make a generative robot for Twitter. So I think we've talked about this before, but like endless screaming is one of them that puts in a random number of A's and R's and G's and H's.
Yeah, something like that.
I put in one that is the things to remind me to say things to people who are going through bad situations in their lives, so that I don't feel overwhelmed with this feeling of, I don't know what to say. The little robot just kind of sends me things, and if I like what it says and it applies to someone I know, I will sometimes just, go ahead and riff off what my robot wrote. And it has things...
Using robots to humanize us, I think, is a good approach to life.
But it's just, it's a JSON set of things, and it's a couple 100 lines long now, and it lives on quick bots done cheap or cheap bots done quick or whatever that is. And so why do I need to commit it? Unless I ever want to, not trash everything or lose it. And so I finally committed that. And then along those same lines, I wanted to read some old blogs, but reading old blogs is kind of a pain. I can either page back, or I can, and read them in the wrong order, or I can start at the beginning and go to their website and try to never close that tab. As I update. So I wanted something that would reblog things, that would take a blog, an RSS feed, and it would send me one post every day or every N hours. And then I could read the blog in order at a rate that is faster than they published, but will eventually put me up to date. And so I made that in Python. Well, no, I made part of that in Python. I'm still working on it. But I also posted that code, and I used the README as a bit of a chance for a creative writing project. Not as creative as Rockstar programming, though. And so I'm playing with Python. I'm between gigs right now. I have a long, slow gig starting soon, but I'm going to need either a couple of fast, short gigs or at least one more long, slow gig to keep me amused. So if you want me to program, preferably in C or C++, which I'm not terrible at.
Rust.
I can even do Python, machine learning. Oh, I do want to mention, I put together, after some frustration with myself with machine learning, I put together a list of all the things I've learned in the last year about machine learning. And it came out as a really good blog post. I'm very proud of it. So if you are interested in machine learning or have been working on it or want to know more about it, check out the blog. It's, I think it's 17 machine learning tools.
Yeah, it was a good post.
So that's what I'm working on. No, it's my chair squeaking, not the headphones. Sorry. If I had cupcakes, it wouldn't squeak.
I don't have a chair squeak remover. I have a lot of audio tools, but chair squeak remover they haven't implemented yet.
That's sad. So sad. Maybe we should just stop now.
Wasn't there something else?
No, I mean, it's 2:56.
Stop the podcast?
Yeah.
Just end it?
Well, I mean, it'd be kind of disappointing to other people I've scheduled through October, but
We could just call it a different podcast after that and start over.
That'd be kind of fun. It'd be kind of fun to not have any listeners again. This is how my brain works, okay? It just is.
So if you're still listening, please unsubscribe so that Elecia can feel a sense of fun that we had back in May of 2013 when we had 20 people downloading our first episode and we were really excited.
I had to go out by myself yesterday. I had to interact with strangers who literally demanded eye contact and chit-chat. It was horrifying.
When did you do that?
When I got the kitty litter. All right, let's close this up. Thank you to Christopher for
whatever
lack of cupcakes.
Well, go get some cupcakes. Stop squeaking your chair and read the Winnie the Pooh.
Winnie the
Pooh. This is why we don't record in the mornings.
Yes. Thank you for listening. Thank you for continuing listening. It has been a pretty fun ride with the last 256 episodes.
Except this one.
Well, there are a couple exceptions. We don't plan on stopping soon. So that was all not real. And we do like hearing from you, except about Rust. I just can't stop with the Rust. I'm sorry.
We need to find a new target of our ire.
We can go back to Pick.
Nobody cares about Pick.
If you would like to contact us, hit the contact link at embedded.fm.
If you would like to not contact us,
hit the about link on embedded.fm. I don't know. There will be show notes that will take you to the I Am Calvary Oath for medical devices, the Mixing homebrew IoT projects, and of course the Rockstar programming language.
All right.
And now Winnie the Pooh. You might remember last time, Winnie was holding a balloon and singing, hoping the bees would think he was a cloud. The bees were still buzzing as suspiciously as ever. Some of them, indeed, left their nest and flew all around the cloud as it began the second verse of this song. One bee sat down on the nose of the cloud for a moment and then got up again. "Christopher, Robin," called out the cloud. "Yes?" "I have been thinking, and I have come to the very important decision. These are the wrong sorts of bees. Are they? Quite the wrong sort. So I think they would make the wrong sort of honey, shouldn't you? Would they? Yes, so I think. I shall come down. How? Asked you. Winnie the Pooh hadn't thought about this. If he let go of the string, he would fall. Bump! And he didn't like the idea of that, so he thought for a long time, and then he said, Christopher Robin, you must shoot the balloon with your gun. Have you got your gun? Of course I have, you said. But if I did that, it would spoil the balloon, you said. But if you don't, said Pooh, I shall have to let go, and that would spoil me. When you put it like that, you saw how it was, and you aimed very carefully at the balloon and fired. Ow! Said Pooh. Did I miss? You asked. You didn't exactly miss, said Pooh, but you missed the balloon. I'm so sorry, you said, and you fired again, and this time you hit the balloon, and the air came slowly out, and Winnie the Pooh floated down to the ground. But his arms were so stiff from holding onto the string of the balloon all that time that they stayed up straight in the air for more than a week. And whenever a fly came and settled on his nose, he had to blow it off. And I think, but I'm not sure, that this is why he has always been called Pooh. Embedded is an independently produced radio show that focuses on the many aspects of engineering. It is a production of Logical Elegance, an embedded software consulting company in California. If there are advertisements in the show, we did not put them there and do not receive money from them. At this time, our sponsors are Logical Elegance and listeners like you.